Hello, Mr. Drybones.
Hi there.
Hey, this is Avi Ablo with Israel Straight Talk, and I'm here in Jerusalem speaking to Mr. Yaakov Kirschen, who is very well known as Mr. Drybones. And where are you, Yaakov?
I'm sitting about a 12-minute walk from the Mediterranean in Herzliya Patuach, little
Sounds
town named for Herzl, Theodor Herzl, who in the 1800s, when everybody knew that there was French anti-Semitism, and suddenly there was this terrible case about Dreyfus, a Jew in the French army, and he was the victim of anti-Semitism. And Herzl was a journalist, and he called a conference together and started an organization called the World Zionist Organization. And here I am in a town named for him. And the World Zionist Organization is still around.
I want to give an opportunity for people watching this who are not familiar with you to just give you a little introduction. Again, I introduced you as Mr. Drybones. As a kid, I remember your cartoon. It's one of the longest syndicated cartoons dealing with Israel, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
That's right. We started on January 1st, 1973, and I've been doing a daily comic strip ever since.
And if I could just throw in my 2 cents, it is one of the best comic strips I know dealing with current events or politics dealing with Israel and the Jewish people. I've gained a real appreciation of how much you can get across in just a little cartoon. The messages, the strong messages about current events, about Israel, about anti-Semitism, about the hypocrisy of the world in dealing or not understanding Israel or misrepresenting Israel. You do a fabulous job with a little cartoon that I'm sure takes you hours to formulate and put together. Am I off there?
Well, no, you're not off, and I think cartoons are becoming more important these days than ever before. It used to be the world was divided into two kinds of people. There were people who were literate, that meant they could read and write, and people who were illiterate, that means they couldn't read or write. We today are post-literate. It means we can read and write, but it's a lot of trouble. So people are texting. If people get an email that's more than 2 paragraphs long, nobody has time to read it. And that means that podcasts and videos like this and cartoons become more and more important. By the way, if people want to find out about Drybones, let me write here. Write drybones.com, and here's where they should go.
Perfect.
Drybones.com. And right now, I'm involved in fighting back against the wave of anti-Semitism and beyond. Beyond is the Western apathy to the plight of Middle East Christians. It just astounds me. Astounds me. Europe is just silent. The Pope runs off to Turkey and goes into a mosque, and Christians are being slaughtered. The only place where Christians can have freedom and a decent lifestyle is in the Jewish state. I mean, it's a funny cartoon, but that's.
And again, I have to throw this in there. There isn't just one cartoon that you've made to highlight that point, to highlight that hypocrisy of the Western world, of the Christian world towards the Middle East, that Israel is the only free place for all races, all religions to live, and it's the other countries in the Middle East that is a danger to humanity and committing genocide, be it the world turns a blind eye. And you don't have one cartoon that shows that. You have plenty of cartoons from so many different angles to wake people up, to internalize that. How do you know people are touched by your cartoons, that you're getting your messages across, and why is it important to you?
I get emails. Just got an email today from a woman in Scandinavia who is a non-Jew and who just ordered 3 Haggadahs. We did a dry bones Haggadah, and people who join our
just as an explanation for people who don't know, Haggadah is the Jewish ritual book that is used on the Passover Pesach holiday for our Seder, for our big meal to recreate the coming out of Egypt thousands of years ago.
I think the Haggadah is more important than we believe.
Okay.
People who love Jews and people who hate Jews all believe that there must be a secret Jewish book. And somehow we have survived through the fall of the Greeks and the Romans and all through history. We keep going. So there must be a secret book. And the Koreans are busy studying Talmud, and the anti-Semites are busy publishing the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And we do have a secret book. And that secret book, as Sherlock Holmes said, if you want to hide something, the best place is to hide it in plain view. What we have in the Haggadah is a script. The Haggadah isn't a book, it's a script. And Jews, at our spring festival, we get together, not in our synagogues where we would be divided. In our synagogues, we'd either be in an Orthodox or in a Reconstructionist or in a Reform or whatever, but we get together in our homes and we sit around the table, all of us, those of us who are wise, those of us who are wicked, we all sit around this table and we take out our Haggadahs. I have a dry bones Haggadah here. Here's the dry bones Haggadah.
Lift it up a little more.
Okay.
So this is a special Haggadah made with your cartoons to tell the story, I imagine, of the Exodus.
No.
Okay.
No.
Clarify.
The purpose of the Haggadah is to teach us how to pass on the message of Jewish civilization to our next generation. That is the entire purpose. And it tells us how to talk to the next generation. Okay? And I wanted to do a Haggadah, and I wanted it to be a totally kosher, complete Haggadah, not making it cutesy, not cutting it down to have it like the 4-minute Seder, and not to use cartoons to be the Haggadah. But I wanted Dry Bones cartoons to be the commentary on the Haggadah. So when you look at a newspaper and you see remember newspapers back then. So in a newspaper, when you had a political cartoon, the cartoon wasn't part of the newspaper in a funny way. It commented on the news. So I decided to do a Haggadah where I would do my commentaries. And how to do commentaries? I did it in a uniquely Jewish layout. And that layout is, we have the text, and then the commentary surrounds the text. So we have a completely kosher, full Haggadah, and the dry bones commentary is around it.
Very nice. And if people want to purchase it, where can they order it, since you're telling us about this unique Haggadah of yours?
Well, the way they can get it is by going to our Indiegogo campaign. We have a campaign now which is to fight anti-Semitism and the apathy to the plight of Middle East Christians. And they can get to it if they go to drybones.com. And if you go
we'll also include a link with the text near this video. So anyone looking around, you'll see the link there.
That would be really cool. And they can get lots of other things, like I want Dry Bones fans to become members. Here's a membership card.
Who doesn't want to be a member of Dry Bones and have the card show?
And then there's tons of stuff that you can get as a member. And one that I'm really proud about is certificates for Christians. And here's one. You don't have to be Jewish to love Israel.
Pull it back a little so we can see some of the graphics. Good.
Okay. And Christian supporters become members, and we send them out their certificates. And there's all kinds of goodies they can get by joining our campaign. I think that what we're witnessing today in the world, instead of sitting and wringing our hands and saying, oh my God, this is terrible, we have to be able to use the internet and our digital power to communicate with each other. And Dry Bones cartoons have now become ammunition for people to be able to share and to send around. So if you're a Zionist or a lover of Israel, for sure somebody has sent you a Dry Bones cartoon or two, and you for sure have sent them out also. So we're trying to now organize this, and the way Herzl made an organization in the 1800s, I want to make an organization now. I want to make a Dry Bones organization. I want people to be members of that, and we're going to have all kinds of activities and all kinds of stuff that we will do. And some of that is, one part of that will be the Dry Bones Academy, where I want to pass on the message of how Dry Bones and cartoon activism works to a new generation.
That's fabulous. We need it, as someone who works in media, to spread the truth about Israel and the Middle East. Visuals, videos, cartoons, they are all so important, and we need as many people as possible producing good quality content to help get the true messages out to the public who are either apathetic or just misinformed because the mass media is hiding the truth from them. So I'll just put the push in. Anyone who knows Dry Bones and familiar with the power of the messaging through your cartoon, come on board and help. Let's get this anti-Semitism project off the ground, and even more powerful, to be supportive of your activities using these visual cartoons. So definitely, and anyone who's not familiar, go visit his blog, drybones.com. Get impressed, like we are, of how powerful it is, and jump on board to help him continue to make a big difference. I wanted to actually get into a little bit about you, Yaakov. Do you have a few more minutes so people
I got as much time
who
as you
Mr.
want.
Dry Bones is?
Well, I'm somebody who was a totally secular American Jew who lived in New York, Brooklyn, and got a good education, went to public school, went to high school, went to college, all in New York. And when I majored in art, and when I got out of, when I was graduated from college, I suddenly discovered that 1492 was not just when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. 1492 was the mass expulsion of Jews from Spain. But somehow that was not an important part of history. And I discovered that everybody was running around yelling, oh, we got to teach black history, and we got to do this, and we got to do that. But the idea of Jewish history was irrelevant, totally irrelevant. And then I realized that as an art major, I could go into any bookstore or any library and look up books of Eskimo art, African art. But if I went to look for a book of Jewish art, there really was none. So I decided I would write a book about Jewish art. So I went to the 42nd Street Library, and I went to the Judaica department, and I got a whole stack of index cards, and I began to plot how to write about Jewish art. And I discovered that Jewish art is built on symbols and artifacts, Seder plates, and the whole vast, rich set of Jewish artifacts. Look just at the sukkah. The sukkah is a three-dimensional painting that you walk into, and you are surrounded by this imagery. What a fabulous artistic thing. But there was no book like that. So I kept working on this book, and then I discovered that there was an image that you weren't supposed to know about, that you couldn't study until you were 40 years old. Well, this got me crazy. And it turned out to be the Merkavah, the chariot. And this was something described in the book of Ezekiel. And so I got into the book of Ezekiel. And the book of Ezekiel, unbelievably, here's a guy who writes 2,600 years ago, and he describes what's happening in the world today. And what's more, he has this vision that when the world thinks it has destroyed us, we will be brought up out of our graves like dry bones. We would come together, the knee bone connected to the shin bone and all this stuff, and we would come back to Israel and we would plant trees. And I said, you know what? This is really incredible.
Wow.
But not being a religious Jew, I was more blown away by this than somebody who was religious and who figured, okay, they had all the answers. I didn't have the answers. How could it be that somebody 2,600 years ago could write about us today? And within 2 years, I had picked up my family and schlepped them to Israel.
Wow.
Decided that
1971, correct? I read that you made Aliyah in 1971.
October 10th, 1971. And I came to Israel and I said, okay, well, I'll start doing a comic strip here. And I thought, what should I call it? I'll call it Kirshen's Corner, with, K for corner. And I couldn't, and then suddenly it hit me. It should be called Dry Bones, because all I'm doing is adding on to what Yehezkel told us. I'm just adding on to the vision of the dry bones. We are living
Wow.
in a time that was seen, and that's why it's called Dry Bones, and that's why I've never pushed myself. So I purposely signed the cartoon sideways so it's hard for people to see. People should see this as dry bones, and they should understand this incredible, this whole division between religious and non-religious and all like this is crazy. Suppose you're on a bus, and the bus is going along, and the driver is lost, and we hit a tree, and we go down a ravine, and we cross a stream, and nobody knows where we are. And I find under my seat there's a map. And I say, whoa, here's a map. And it shows the tree, and it shows the ravine, and it shows all this stuff. So I say to the driver, hey, here's a map that shows exactly where we are. And then people would start arguing about who drew the map. I don't care who drew the map. The fact is that the map exists. That if a person will just take the book of Ezekiel without getting into the mishigas of whether they are religious or whether they are not religious, and just read this book. And when they read this book, they'll see that Ezekiel saw a flying machine. You know, I took out a pencil and paper and I began to draw it. It's a heavier than aircraft. It has fire coming out of the bottom, and there's a guy sitting on the top in a cockpit, and it lands. Wow. It's totally understandable as a heavier than aircraft that he saw. Well, for centuries, that was an unbelievable thing. It's not like Ezekiel saw a man on a flying carpet or that he saw a winged horse. He saw something that would not be understandable until today. And to me, all of that is crazy. And I'm not going to say who wrote the map, but we have the map, and we should understand the map, and people should sit down and read the book of Ezekiel, and they should understand why dry bones is called dry bones, and hopefully they'll become members of dry bones and not just fans.
I'm sure I'm not the only one who is just blown away by learning, one, why your cartoon is called Dry Bones, and the meaning and ultimate goal you have with that. And it touches me personally, and I think we have more in connection now than we even had before we started this video interview, because if I understand correctly, part of your messaging of your Dry Bones cartoon is to bring the Jewish people together. And to bring them together as a people, one, and to bring them together and understand that we're to their homeland here in Israel. You're centralizing that. Regardless of our difference, we are one people, and we're supposed to be one people while dealing with our differences, one people in our one homeland. And our personal connection that I want to introduce you to is the name of our company is 12 Tribe Films. Why did I come up with the name of 12 Tribe Films? For that,
because we're waiting for the other 10 to be found.
Exactly. It's the bringing of us together. It's the bringing of all the tribes together. That's the ultimate aim, the ultimate vision, to be doing what we're doing, using the internet, using media, using visuals, trying to bring us as a people together, trying to educate the world about us as a together people, about our homeland where we're all supposed to be. And you're doing the same things with your Dry Bones. So you just got me that much more excited to be talking to you, Yaakov. Thank you.
Do you have time for another little story?
For sure. I think people would love to hear another story from you.
Years and years ago, it was in the 70s, and I was at the Kotel, at the Western Wall. Not at the wall, but in the plaza behind it. And there were crowds of people there, and they were watching Jews pray at the wall and stuff. And I heard somebody behind me who was a pastor, and he was there with a group of people from his church. And people were saying, "What's that?" And he would tell them, and he'd say, "What's that?" And he would tell them. And people had taken out spice boxes to be able to have a last whiff of the beauty of Shabbat. And someone said, what are they doing with that? And I was amazed because the pastor said, "I don't know." And I thought, wow, that's really cool. Somebody who says, "I don't know." So I turned around and I said, "That's a spice for, and the beauty of Shabbat, and we're leaving and dup, and all like that." And he says, "Oh, that's interesting." And he says, "From your accent, you sound like you're an American." I said, "Yes." And he says, "Where you're from?" And I said, "New York." And he said, "And you moved to Israel?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Why?" So I thought, and it's it's not comfortable, like saying the real deep reason.
Right.
So I said, well, I lived in New York, and that's the Big Apple, and as far as the Jewish people is concerned, Israel is the Big Apple, New York is second rate, so I came here, da, 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 da. And he said, interesting. And then he turned to his congregation and said, remember when we came up to Jerusalem and I said that it says that in the end times the Jews will rebuild the cities, and I showed you the rebuilding. And he said, and I told you about they would plant the trees, and I showed you the forest. He says, it also says that the Jews will be ingathered.
Yeah.
And what we have here is a Jew who has been ingathered, and he doesn't even know it.
He got the depth of it without you even having to say it yourself.
That's right. So I'm here because I got ingathered. And hopefully people who join us and who join Dry Bones and become members, hopefully in the end they too will be ingathered. And in another generation, probably all the Jews in the world will be living here, because there'll be no place for us in the outside world. And once again, we will hold hands and pass on and watch as maybe Western civilization crumbles and disappears and we live in an Islamic world, or whatever happens. You know, we sat together and worried when Rome fell, and we said, my God, what's going to happen? Rome fell. How are we going to? It's like when the Jews when we came out of Egypt, and we came to the edge of the Red Sea, and we turned around and we saw the Egyptian chariots coming to kill us. You know, as someone who is interested in humor and jokes, I tried to find what is the oldest Jewish joke. And the oldest Jewish joke is in the Torah. Because what does it say? It says that when we looked and saw the Egyptian chariots coming to kill us, did it say, and the Jews turned unto Moses and said, bring forth yet another miracle? Did they say to Moses, appeal unto the Lord? No. They said, were there no graves in Egypt? You brought us into the desert to die. It's a joke. And we have been communicating with jokes and with humor ever since.
Sarcastic humor from the Bible.
Absolutely. And we're still the same people. And the fact that that joke still works, even though religious Jews will try to give it all kinds of meaning, it's a joke. And Jewish humor is the way we communicate. And Dry Bones was the image of our time. And both of those are together in Dry Bones. And hopefully people will join our new organization and become members and not just fans.
That was a great way to end our interview, but I have one other question I wanted to raise before we end this. If you don't mind me asking one more question, I found a very interesting piece of information about you that I wanted to then bring it to today. Back in the late 1960s, if I'm not mistaken, I learned that you were an official delegate of the Democratic Party in some elections at one point in time. Is that correct?
That's correct. I was, the Vietnam War was going on, and I was an activist, and I believed that was the wrong war for America to be in, and I wanted to fight against that. And I started an organization of people in Upper Manhattan, Washington Heights and all like that, and ran as a delegate and won and became a delegate to the 1968 Democratic Convention.
Wow. So I want to hear your feedback from your cartoons, I think your understanding of politics today and Israel today and Islam today and the threats in the Middle East are very different than today's Democratic administration and many Democratic politicians hold. So I'd love to hear what you think about that.
I don't think it's so different. I don't think it's so different because at that time in 1968, Israel was looking to get 22 fighter jets. And there I was, and my name had been printed in newspapers as part of the delegation, the New York delegation. So every day, my mailman, Kirschen, would come and bring me a bag of letters that I had gotten from grape pickers, from people who wanted a separate school system in Harlem, from all kinds of organizations, but nothing from any Jews. And then when I got there was no approach from any Jews. And so we, at some point, our New York delegation had an interview. We wanted to interview various candidates for something. And so we invited a group of delegates to come and speak to us. And I cleverly made up a list of 10 questions. And one of those questions was, should we sell the jets to Israel? And so everybody who came up was asked to respond to that. And every Jewish Democrat candidate, when they came to that, said no.
Wow.
And the only candidate who said, of course, we have to help Israel, was a black woman named Shirley Chisholm. And she was the only one. And when the 1968 convention, which was really stormy, when that was over, I got back to New York and I said, something is seriously wrong here. So I opened up the phone book. We used to have phone books in those days.
Right.
And I looked up Zionist, and there was Zionist Organization of America. And it was at 515 Park Avenue. And I went there with my suit and my tie and my badge as a delegate. And I went to see Jacques Turchina, who was the head of the operation. And I came in and I said, excuse me, I run a Democrat party, and I was a delegate, and you guys never contacted me. And he looked me in the eye, and he said, we don't need people like you. We talk to Hubert Humphrey. What do we got to talk to you for? I thought, wow, we are in serious trouble. So, I don't think I've told this story for a long time. So I went out and went around this building, which was filled with Jewish organizations, and nobody was in any office. There was one little office, and there were people working. And I went in, and I said, who are you guys? And they said, we're Sharut La'am. We send Jews to Israel. I said, that's interesting. Can I help you? And they said, what can you do? And I said, I do cartoons, I can do copy, I can do that. So I began to volunteer to help them. And one day, they came to me and they said, you know, we have made an appointment with you because there is a job that you could do. And that job is running the Zionist Organization of America, and they're looking for a guy to do this. Well, I didn't need a job, but okay. So I went to the interview. And it was the only interview I ever went to where I didn't have to lie about anything. You know? Do you know how to organize groups? Yeah, I organize Northern America. Do you know how to do? Yes, I write copy. Do you know how to do everything, right? And the guy who was interviewing me Fabulous, I said. He said, one last question. Are you thinking of moving to Israel? And at that point, I had never thought of it. So I said to him, well, I never really thought of it, even though I've been writing all this stuff for Sharut Ma'am, but it's certainly, I guess, a possibility. And he said, gee, that's too bad, because we have a policy of not hiring anybody
Oh my
for
God.
Aliyah. And I said, why is that? And he said, well, if we're going to build a strong Zionist organization in America, we can't rely on people who are going to be running off to Israel.
Wow.
So I said, well, I guess I'm really a committed Zionist, but my belief in Zionism is not that strong that I'm willing to pledge never to move to Israel.
Wow.
Thinking that this was funny. And he said, too bad. And I walked out of the meeting and I went back to Sharut Ma'am and I said, find me a shaliach. I'm moving to Israel.
Wow.
And how it happened.
That is quite a story. That is really, really quite a story. I want to say thank you, Yaakov. Thank you for giving us this time to do this video interview. Thank you for your fabulous and impactful Dry Bones cartoon strip that's been running for over 40 years. Keep on doing it. Please keep on training other people to do similar things as well. We need as many visuals out there to show the justice and in the state of Israel as opposed to the rest of the Middle East. And anyone can come and join you and help get these even more cartoons and your anti-Semitism project of cartoons to bring the true light to the world through humor. Go visit drybones.com or visit the Indiegogo link that we'll give as well. Yaakov, thank you so much, and keep up the great job you're doing.